Okay, and we're live. All right, I don't know if anybody's watching, but we're live now. I'm going to play that intro music, and then we can do a show. Do it now. News, ops, and a little bit of paranoia. Welcome to the Iron Sysadmin Podcast. All right, folks, welcome to tonight's episode of the Iron Sysadmin Podcast. I'm your host, Nate, and I am joined tonight by both Mark and, you may not have seen him in a while, but Charles is back. Welcome back, Charles.
I exist.
So, yes, you totally exist. You've been busy, I think, converting your workplace over to a remote possibilities.
But more about that shortly. So yeah, and of course, Mark, you guys know from the last show, we enjoy his singing so much that we've decided to bring him on as a more regular co-host. So not only to talk about Red Hat stuff, which is something we're not going to talk about tonight. We're going to try anyway.
Yeah, we probably will do it. Mark has a habit of sometimes breaking out into song, his own renditions of Disney.
Let it go, let it go. I'll sing right at the beginning.
Just
My
get that
contract
right.
says I get to do that at least once a show, so that might be the only time, but it probably won't be.
Get it right out of the way, right out of the gate.
Right out of the way. Haven't even really had much of my bourbon yet. Yay, Buffalo Trace. Woo.
It'll get better as the bourbon gets lower, right?
No doubt. I have a little over 2 fingers of bourbon. Yeah, that'll make me very happy.
Okay, so tonight we decided to depart from the theme you may have noticed on our most recent shows, where we're talking about all kinds of Red Hat stuff. So tonight, Charles is going to talk a little bit. He's been going through quite a bit of sort of transition into AWS, and of course, with the coronavirus and COVID-19, all these changes that everybody's been hit with, having to just like turn on a dime and switch to remote and whatever. As you guys know, Charles works in higher education, so he doesn't only have employees. Well, I guess the employees aren't really your first concern anyway, but perhaps the students, right? And the ability to continue enabling learning. So these are the sort of things that we're going to talk about tonight. And with that, I guess I'm just going to hand it over to you, Charles, and however you wanted to lead into this, and we'll just kind of chat. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's a complicated topic that's trying to unify sort of two different strands. So, yeah, so I work for a small liberal arts college, as Nate used to, and something that's been happening for us over the last 5 weeks is that we've had to pivot to online-only instruction. As we sent all our students home, as most schools did. Now, we already had substantial online activities and online learning, but it's one thing to have those as a complement to the physical classroom experience, and of course the in-person college experience is what we're really about. And it's quite another where not only that is suddenly the only thing, which means even people who were using these tools as an adjunct, now they have to do everything through that, which means, rebuilding lesson plans, really just changing the way they teach. And then people who had maybe resisted those tools until now basically don't have a choice. And that's covered a lot of things. I mean, it's not just like, learning management system, but Zoom, Google Meet, people who may not have had good home remote conferencing setups before, well, they've had to move ahead real quick. The second thing is, as I think we've mentioned on this podcast before, is that we are already in the middle of a process of transitioning from a self-hosted on-premises environment to hosting on AWS. So that's migrations and refactorings. So both of these things are happening simultaneously. And which is, on the one hand, it's like, well, we're ramping up capacity by moving to AWS anyway, so, well, whatever. On the other hand, a crisis is not necessarily the best time to be changing the way things work because stability is at a premium. When this is like the only way that people or institution can communicate with each other. And so talking about capacity planning, one of the interesting things about hosting on premises, and maybe this is not true for everyone, but it's certainly true for us, is that you take certain things for granted. A good example would be sending email. We have the ability to send email. That was done by some kind of magic that Nate managed that I didn't really have to inquire too deeply about. It generally worked. We run Moodle. It's a learning management system. It's open source. It's pretty popular. It sends a lot of email. Professors can use it to send email to their students, like to specific courses or groups of students. Moodle sends reminders. If you had asked me 3 months ago how many emails it sent in a day, I would have shrugged and said, I have literally no idea, and I don't care.
Right. I can see where this is going already.
Oh, yeah. It was never relevant. Now, if you are going to host on Amazon, on AWS, you use their SES, was it Simple Email Service? Some acronym. You use that to send email, and it gives you, you set up an IM role account. There's a blessed SMTP address to use, and fine, whatever. But it works great, and the IPs are trusted, so you don't have to worry too much about spam blacklists. But if you want to send more than 200 emails a day, and at a rate greater than 1 email per second, and to people who are like an explicit whitelist of confirmed addresses, you have to request that you get on Sandbox by Amazon, which means, among other things, you need to actually know how many emails you send. So for the first time, we actually had to look at this and actually find out what the scale was.
Right. And then I'd imagine it's twofold, right? So the first answer is probably not that hard to find because there's lots of ways to parse, the email log data coming out of a Linux box. But the other piece of that is not only are you now running email in a different way or sending email in a different way, and you have to try to come up with this number, but you're also pivoting to a more probably I would guess a more email heavy world.
Yes, indeed.
Because of the remote learning.
So right. Yes, indeed. That's exactly. So a few months. So I guess it was about 2 months ago. Time has no meaning now.
Right. What month is it again?
I think it's about March 50th. So
I thought it was April 300th. All right. I was
either way. Maybe it's March. So, we have our postfix logs in Splunk, and a coworker, I'm sure you know who, came up with a little magic to figure out the number of
Voldemort
emails being sent per day. And it turned out on average, it was about...
I may have already had a stored report that did that for you. That probably only I knew about.
I was going to say nobody knows that. So
anyway,
thanks. Why don't you go back 2 months ago and we would have cared.
Okay.
But anyway, so we pull the numbers and so we have historical data going back a year. And so, you see peaks and valleys depending on whether we're in session or not and weekend or not. And the average is about, daily average is like 4,000 to 5,000. And there's this one day where it really peaked. But we're like, okay, but we could say we top out about 10,000 per day, which in retrospect, Amazon's like, well, whatever, here's 100,000. The interesting thing is then we went back and looked at the numbers again out of curiosity after about a week and a half after spring break, having pivoted to online only. Who wants to guess at the percent increase?
Tenfold.
That's not a percentage. That would be...
It's not a percentage.
Okay, it's not a percentage.
1,000%.
There. Is it the same thing?
Right.
Look, numbers, man.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I missed a perfect song opportunity a few minutes ago for the first time.
Stop. Hate to see it. Yeah, it doubled. We were sending
20K?
It's about 13. It's about I think the peaks were like around 16 to 17, but we were averaging like 13,000 a day. But when you consider that we already had something like 70 to 80% of all the courses that we taught, we had worked down the past, and on average between 60 and 80% of the courses we taught in a given term, they were actually like real courses and not just like, accounting notations. We're using Moodle in some capacity. So with the other people who weren't using Moodle starting to use Moodle to communicate with students and lost that in-class presence, doubled. So that was very interesting. And that's just an example of a statistic we weren't even measuring.
Right. Because no one really cared, because especially if you go back, a year and a half or whatever, when this was all on-prem, it didn't matter. It literally didn't matter. The only person that ever looked at those statistics was me, and that was just so I could make sure that my email system wasn't being overrun.
Yeah.
Right. And that was it. I didn't care how many you sent. I just had to know, so I would know if, there were problems. Right.
Right. And, we never measured it. There were a lot of things we didn't measure because, when everything's kind of rolled up into your CapEx, you don't really think about like, oh, well, this is a little overbuilt. But it doesn't matter because the VM spawn, the underlying infrastructure is paid for. Yeah, it's paid for. It's paid for, and it's not like there's no internal chargebacks. It's not like web development had a line item that said, well, you're using these many resources. So
I'm using 1/10 of a penny per email or something, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, Charles, because when I was at my job before Red Hat, a pharmaceutical company that rhymed with Schmerk. I was at Merck. I think I've said that before.
Yeah.
We started to use Amazon in the early days, and what struck me was their billing model was very much like the Thénardiers in Les Miserables. Remember the song "Master of the House," where he like charges you for every little thing, and that's kind of the way Amazon gets you. So how do they bill you for email? Is it based on the data flow? Is it per X number of emails? Like, how's that work?
I'm trying to remember. It can't have been anything particularly significant because I'm not really
being yelled at for spending too much money.
Well, we haven't migrated yet.
Okay.
I'm going to do that terrible thing where I vamp and actually just look it up. But
I could have done that, but then it's not a conversation.
Sure.
Indeed. Mark looking it up and filing it away in his head doesn't make good podcast content.
No. See, I'm learning.
Okay, so your first.
Nate's going to regret asking me to be a permanent co-host. He's totally friggin' regret it one of these days.
This is about par for the course.
Okay, so it looks like your first 62,000 emails per month are free, and then.
Or should we say included?
And then included, yes, and then 10 cents for every 1,000 emails beyond that. So the answer is, for an operation our scale, it's like the usage charges for websites.
You're doing $13K a day.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's not awful, I guess. Maybe. All right.
Well, but if you consider that the platform that's going to be running it, is going to have a pair of not small EC2 instances and an RDS instance behind it, it's like, I don't even care what the email number is. It is so low compared to everything else we're paying for.
Sure. Email is like the fact that I ordered Red Robin for my family and I had to spend 99 cents for a gluten-free bun for my one daughter.
Yeah. It's like you pay it. Exactly. Yes. You pay it because you have to. It's the cost of doing business, but it's not really what you're spending the money on.
Okay.
But it's just another thing that Amazon uses to get the money from you. As Mark goes back into song.
But you're also just but for the first time, you actually have to think about your capacity. Amazon encourages you to think about what are we building? What kind of capacity do we need?
And I'd argue that's not a bad thing, because I think a terrible habit a lot of IT people get into, and I'm actually going through that with one of my customers right now, is they build something and their estate keeps growing and growing and growing, like the fat kid eating cake, and all of a sudden things stop working. Like they're working one day and they stop working the next, and you look and you realize, oh, yeah, you were managing this number of nodes before, and now you're managing this number of nodes, and your system management tool fell over because it wasn't sized to handle that many.
And then
we're the assholes.
Then you have the dreaded conversation, but nothing changed.
Nothing changed.
I didn't touch anything. Yeah, except that your capacity is 10 times what it used to be. 10 times is my thing for the night, tenfold.
10 times.
Yeah. I would agree. I don't think it's a bad thing. And I think that they give you reporting tools that are useful. There's a learning curve. The sheer number of metrics in CloudWatch is just dizzying, but I think the key is to figure out the ones that are relevant. For actually measuring capacity. We went through this. Well, okay, I can't tell that story, but now we grossly overspec a lot of the infrastructure that we used on premises, but in retrospect, but
we did that intentionally, and because, as you stated, we already paid that money.
Yeah, there was no incentive not to.
Yeah, there was no reason that your web server couldn't have 8 cores and 16 gig of memory if it was the thing that we wanted to be absolutely certain we're always working, right?
Yeah, but by the same token, it was also because it was easier from our perspective, my team's perspective, to request an overspec box than to request something that was maybe a little more dialed in. But then if it needed to have things added later, well, we have to go back. Things have to change.
Because that's the worst. Like
adding hardware sysadmins
on the floor. Oh, yeah.
Well, we're talking VMs here, Mark. They're really easy to change, but the difference is that the web team doesn't have direct rights to do that, or at least they didn't in the old model. Basically, Charles's team and I, and later on both the sysadmins, would have a weekly meeting where all we did was talk about what systems do you need. Do you need more disk space for things? Do you need, more memory or CPU for anything? Is this stuff working? Is that stuff working? What do we think future plan? Like every week, we would have a 2-hour meeting where all we did was sit around and talk about web architectures, right?
It was good work. It was important work, but it was still a fairly major commitment. And so the way Amazon, I think, would prefer you approach it, and the way we are approaching it, you build an auto scaling group with a bunch of EC2 instances or containers, whatever is most appropriate for application. You start with what's probably the best reasonable size, and then you look at your metrics. And you're like, okay, do I need to scale this out horizontally? Are these boxes under-provisioned? Or are they over-provisioned? Like, we're watching the load on the Moodle server. The web server itself it's technically... the baseline load has about doubled since March, but it's still not even cracking 50% of what it's capable of handling.
Or as we call it, Smarch.
Smarch.
Yeah.
We're in Smarch now.
Yeah. So I do have to. I'm just kind of curious because I remember some of the design problems, or maybe not problems, but limitations we ran into when running Moodle. With like high availability and whatever. Did you fix or work around any of those so that you can actually make this thing scale, or is it really still just a fat VM with a bunch of disk behind it and a bunch of
PHAT?
Fat.
Yeah. So on-prem. Yeah, on-prem it's as is, and as you know, we grew the disk, so it's at 1.5 terabyte direct mount now, and it's a good thing we grew it too, because yes, that's something else that spiked was upload usage.
Sure,
fat.
But fat.
He likes big VMs, and he cannot lie. The other says can't deny.
But we solved the performance issue on AWS. Because the thing is, we saw the exact same performance issue on EFS that we had seen with on-prem clusters. So you're off the hook. You didn't screw up.
Yay! It wasn't cluster's fault.
Oh, okay.
But the difference is that on AWS, we just very quickly threw a Redis instance of Elasticache in front to handle caching duties, and that cleaned up the performance.
So let me ask you something, Charles. Yeah. One of the other challenges back at Merck was people wanted to put their stuff in the cloud, but all they were really doing was lifting and shifting traditional VMs and putting them in what was essentially, especially at that time, a less stable environment. Are you guys re-architecting for your apps to be like self-scaling and cloud aware, and components of it can be blown out and it'll repair, or are you basically lifting a VM into EC2?
So I'm going to speak for really the things I'm responsible for. There are certainly some workloads that we're migrating. They're going to be, just because of what they're running, are going to be lift and shift, and there's not going to be a lot of engineering done. But for a lot of the things I run, which are very traditional LAMP stack applications, Moodle, WordPress, Drupal, these are applications that are pretty friendly to the concept of being treated
segmentation.
That way. Yeah. We already, things were pretty well split up between, database on one server, application on this server.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
You're welcome.
I think for helping you architect all to begin with.
I think the thanks may have been implied. But yes. Yeah, it was already very well segmented in that respect. We had Nginx proxying on a separate box, the model that we're following on AWS, we have a load balancer, and then load balancers going to your targets. That was something we were like, oh yeah, we would do that anyway.
That's pretty much the way we had it already anyway.
Conceptually, that made sense. But yeah, so the re-architecting, we were already pretty close to being able to have that kind of destructible environment. It was really just a question of changing the way we were building our artifacts for deploying the application. So the way we do that now is every time we build an application now, and we kick a build in our GitLab environment, it redeploys both the infrastructure and the application. So for the EC2 instances, the application code is just being downloaded as an asset, and then everything is set up as it were. Apache is installed, PHP FPM is installed and configured. The application config is merged from the environment variables coming over from Secrets Manager. So, we've taken this to the point that our staging environments actually tear themselves down in the evenings and weekends, and then bring themselves back up at the start of the workday.
That's cool. I'm glad you guys finally got there. I wanted to see that kind of thing happen in even the on-premise dev and stage environments that I used to help you guys run. I thought it would have been great to be able to codify all that stuff so that all the infrastructure you needed to run a dev system, you could just up it comes, do your stuff, and then turn it off when you're done.
And Mark, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's an example where we never cared about the fact that we had a staging environment that ran 24/7. Whatever, it would be more of a pain to turn it off and bring it back on. Amazon, you're paying for it, so you start caring. Yeah, you start caring very much, and you don't want to obsess over cost engineering. But at the same time, if you have a staging environment that's basically not being touched on the weekends, you're running it. That's a pile of money you're just lighting on fire, and it does add up. But
that's where Nate has to hit the soundboard with the dad yelling, "Turn off the lights when you leave the room."
I don't have one of those. I have Homer. Is that close enough?
Sure. There you go. But so beyond the cost engineering, the fact that it brings itself up every morning. It's not like the EC2 instances, were turned off and turned themselves back on in the morning. No, the RDS instance was paused. It unpauses itself in the morning, and that sends an event that tells the auto-scaling group, hey, go make me 2 EC2 instances. And so again, they then get rebuilt from the ground up. So we also know that whole deployment method is still working.
That's pretty cool.
It is.
They're so close to I can't mention Red Hat products as you said we would. They're so close to one of them right now. Mm-hmm. Oh my God.
No, I know.
I'm sure you know, because it's one of them that I wanted to deploy at the college for freaking ever.
Yep. So it's a refactoring. It's not a significant refactoring in our case, but certainly for some applications, there's further to go. But there again, there's that question. well, how much capacity do you really need? Do you need, and how much workload segmentation do you want to do? So we have a number of database clusters on-prem, but there's one in particular that's set up in the traditional primary replica approach because some of our applications don't deal very well with clustering.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some Moodle environments, a WebWork environment, RT. There's a couple of different things. They're all sharing this, set of database servers, and load spiked on that database server, and it's actually more of a problem than it was on any of the downstream web servers. We're actually, it's okay, but if we weren't migrating workloads off of there in the next few months, I'd be kind of concerned because we're like right at the edge on disk space.
Ugh.
So do we? So there's an example where we bite the bullet on cost engineering. Like, you know what? It was great having this shared workload, this shared database cluster. We put a bunch of different applications on, just had to manage this one thing. But it also meant that all those applications were now basically dependent on each other in a very non-obvious way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is kind of an obvious way, simply in that the database backend is all shared across those applications. And I think we always knew that was a possible scenario, right? Where the database was the problem and it brought a whole bunch of applications down to its knees, or down to their knees when it had an issue. In fact, I seem to remember troubleshooting issues like that with you and your team several times, especially before we had that clustered.
Yep.
So
it was absolutely a problem. It's one of those problems that, oh dear, the cat has found the empty food bag.
It's all downhill from here.
It's definitely one of those things that didn't. It's like it didn't happen enough to provoke anybody to do anything about it. But at the same time, when we started drawing up our plans for how we're going to migrate these workloads, and at first we were thinking, okay, yeah, we'll have a shared RDS environment because boy, RDS is a little expensive. And then when we started actually doing our infrastructure as code stuff with the Cloud Development Kit, we're like, this is awkward as hell to have to reference these external references. Let's just bite the bullet, spend a little more money, and actually have completely independent infrastructure. These workloads don't actually have anything to do with each other. Why are we tying them together?
Right. And in a case where we were running an on-prem database, it just made sense. We put a whole lot of effort into making one very resilient database infrastructure, and it made sense to share that load. But in a cloud or AWS, or I assume this applies to Azure and other cloud providers, you don't have that limitation, right? If you have a dozen database instances, you don't have all of the cruft that goes along with managing a dozen database servers like you would if you were running it on-prem.
Yeah, because you're basically, you have to, like, if you're using RDS, for example, you're not running the database server anymore.
Right. That's what I mean.
Not.
You don't have an OS to patch. You don't have, logins to manage. You don't have any of that because it's all abstracted away. That's the whole point of software as a service, which is what RDS is.
Yeah. But that means you really do have to think differently about what you're doing. Like if you just do a straight lift and shift of everything without really examining what you're doing, you're missing a real opportunity.
Yeah.
But it also means that you need to have a better understanding than you might have had previously. Like, what does my infrastructure actually do? What does it actually
do here?
Would you say? walk through a day for us.
Come in and stare at the wall for about 15 or 20 minutes.
It's like figuring out, like, so what actually talks to what?
I talk to the engineers.
The engineers can't talk to people.
What the hell is your problem?
Anyway, we were talking about something in the cloud.
Charles was being totally serious, and as usual, I railroaded us into office space.
That's okay.
It's good to have somebody to bounce off of, but you're just figuring out, like, these are actually fundamental questions that you think you know the answers to, and you realize that you kind of don't. Like, and you have to ask, am I doing something because it's the right thing to do, or because my infrastructure as it existed dictated that I do it this way. Like, it made perfect sense to have, two pairs of highly available WordPress servers with workloads split up in a certain way, just because it was easier. It was ultimately easier to manage, but it also means that if one of those workloads starts having a feeling or having a moment, then all of a sudden you've got a widespread outage.
Yeah.
I teed that one up for you. Then you have these outages that happen, or these incidents that happen, basically because you've bound the fates of certain sites together from an infrastructure perspective. But if they were on different infrastructure, it wouldn't really, you wouldn't see that kind of thing.
Right.
So that's really a strong argument. Again, when I was in the SA world, back in my day, basically you gave people a box, right? Here's your box or your boxes, and the app people just did whatever. There were definitely times where it would have been super helpful if I had a better understanding of application flow and what was actually going on. And so I think what I'm hearing is there's a strong argument that the folk doing the system design maybe need to have better conversations and a better understanding of the application flow so they can advise and help make better decisions right there.
So those meetings that I was talking about, the 2 hours every week, that was part of why we had those meetings. Because I admit I know more about website operation than maybe some sysadmins, but I'm not an expert, right?
Yeah.
But I am, or I was at that point, the guy who knew how to run systems, and the web team were the ones that knew how to run the web applications. So instead of just making them put all of their requests into text in a ticket somewhere, and then I try to parse it, and then we hope we get it right, we started having literally direct meetings where we bounced ideas back and forth. And I think as a result, we came up with better infrastructure because of it. That's exactly what you're saying, right? The web people and the engineering people are talking with each other and making a better product.
And what's funny is at Merck, I'm sorry, Charles, at Merck, we had that tight relationship with the web team because the web was the first thing that was allowed on Linux. So we actually understood the web infrastructure really well and how they ran their web stuff. It was all the other third-party applications.
Oh, okay, right.
Here's a Linux box. It's a black box, and the application people generally weren't very. We didn't really have those deep conversations, so maybe there were some opportunities there if we had. But yeah, the web team we had that deep relationship with, and it definitely showed, right?
Yeah, and it's it's a conversation. It's not just a case where the web people are like, we need X and Y. It's a conversation. It's like, so tell me about X and Y. Tell me what you're trying to do.
Tell me what about your Maza.
Yeah. Because otherwise, I put in a request that looks like okay, that's a thing I can do, but what are you actually? What's going on, man? Because you don't know what you don't know. I didn't have much experience with proxying before I got to Lafayette, and I'll never forget the time I put in a request that looked absolutely unreasonable on its face, but seemed reasonable to me. And the former head of digital infrastructure, Mark, you probably met John Fulton at some point.
So he also works for Red Hat now.
Yes. Oh yeah. It's like, why don't you just accomplish this with SSH forwarding? And I can't. I've been running Linux for something like well over a decade. Never did SSH forwarding. Nobody ever told me about it.
Right.
Dirt simple, but again, nobody ever tells you.
You don't know what you don't know, like you said.
Yeah, I can remember having to have almost flat out arguments with the web team about proxying when we were first trying to deploy it, because that was a thought that came out of the what used to be the network and systems team, and that was actually me and Jason had come up with the idea, like, we should have these reverse proxies in front of the web presence so that when people, there's another layer of protection in between the world and the web stuff. And going to the web team and trying to sell that was not easy. Because you want to do what to my application? No. We just want to help protect it. But this and that.
And without dredging up too much history, let me just say that you all improved as salesmen over the years. All right. And so now, with the model we have now, where our web boxes aren't even in a publicly accessible network, only the load balancer is.
Right.
But we're all
that was always the goal. That was always the goal. Right. We never quite got there while I was there. It took a move to AWS to make it happen. Yeah.
it's something that we're comfortable with now.
Right. So, we're like half hour into this topic. Is there more you want to touch on? Because we can certainly continue, or we can try to start putting a bow on this, and we can move along.
A pretty bow.
Pretty bow. I don't know if I have any.
Those were the things that were kind of forefront of my mind. Just like last couple of months, just having to have a much deeper understanding of how my applications work. And Nate, what are you wearing?
My first thought was the beginning of Terminator 3 when he puts on the glasses.
I'll tell you exactly how that happened. So I'm like, I have all these little girls in the house. I must have a bow somewhere on my desk that I can hold up. And I saw these glasses that my 5-year-old got me for Christmas. I figured I'd put them on.
Well, and of course, podcasting is
all of you that are watching the video know exactly what I'm talking about, and those of you that aren't, sorry. Anyway, you were trying to say something intelligible when I did that.
All these things. I provoked the question. Just having to have this much deeper understanding of like what your application does, and that comes at it a couple of different ways. It's one's like, oh well, I've always had this much capacity. Okay, well, do you have like usage data over time? Do you have like is Nagios monitoring? Do you have process load graphs? Like, are you even using that capacity? Do you need it? If you take uploads, what does your upload growth look like over time? Admittedly, that maybe matters a little less with Amazon, since an EFS file system will just expand forever. And you never need to resize it.
Right.
It's still relevant.
I mean, you're still paying for the storage, right?
You're still paying for this. Yeah, you're paying for the storage. And so maybe you think about storage classes and whatnot, but you don't have to worry, hey, I'm going to have a service affecting maintenance, or I got to go grow the disk.
Right. Or I have to migrate to a new SAN, which I know is a conversation that we've had many times in the past.
Yep.
SAN be keeping us down.
There's this whole category. Yeah, there's this whole category of considerations that aren't relevant anymore. But then there's this whole new set of things you have to start thinking about. Or like, hey, I've got this janky systemd based cron system that I'm using on my WordPress environment.
Janky?
Oh, it's janky. Do I want to run this on? I can probably run this on EC2 and Amazon. Do I want to? Do I need this?
Right.
And then you start thinking, okay, well, like start thinking, am I doing anything that presupposes state on my VMs? I hope not. Boy, I sure hope not, because that's a bad habit. But if I am, what can I do about that?
Right.
Because as you say, I should be, for this, in this kind of environment, EC2, an EC2 instance or anything like it is really
there's new ways of thinking. There are new ways of thinking, and the developers need to be in those new ways of thinking, or else you could be in big trouble.
Yeah, and you got to be like, I like to say I'm on a first name basis with all the VMs on premises here, whereas if the instances were deploying on Amazon, I don't care. Couldn't care less. It's going to be destroyed, in a few days when I redeploy again.
Right, and that's how it should be on EC2 or on AWS in general. That's how it needs to be designed, because you can't carry your pets into the cloud and expect them to work the way they did on-prem. I mean, they may work like they did on-prem, but it's not the same environment. It's really not the same, and you can't treat it the same.
No, and you got to let it go. And you got to be
let it go. You walked into this song.
And, that's a mental adjustment that you have to make, and it's also just an engineering question.
Yeah.
But it's this whole new category of problems to think about. They're nice problems to have in some ways.
We could go all into how Red Hat can help you make that happen across any cloud, and including your own data center, but I'll save that talk for some other day. So, unless there were any other thoughts, I think we can move along into the center section of the show where we just ramble on about things, kind of like we just did for the last 40 minutes.
But with less focus.
Less cloud. So, all right, here we go then. All right, now I got to find my show notes. Here we go. All right, so I don't know that I have any real announcements except our usual Patreon update. I guess we can... The only conference that I know of that's still happening, albeit virtual, is Summit, which is coming up. Well, we can talk about the fact that it's virtual and free.
Truth.
And coming up next week. So if you haven't registered for Summit, you should, because it's free. There's a lot of people registered. That's about all I'm going to say.
Oh, yeah, I probably shouldn't tell. Yeah,
I was going to say, I don't know if the number of people registered is a thing we can't even talk about, but whatever. There's a lot of people. There's a lot, and it's more than, as far as I know anyway, more than have ever actually been physically present for Summit.
More than are supposed to be in a small place right now.
Yes, a whole lot more. I don't know if there must be a venue somewhere that holds as many people as we're talking about, but I don't know. Not in the days of social distancing.
No, not my house for sure.
Yeah, no, not the whole lot that my house is on. Anyway, so Patreon. We gained a couple patrons. I think one was before the last show. I think we had 13 patrons last show. We have 14 now. So I'm going to read through them quick. We got our old faithful 22532, who's been there since the beginning. Thank you again. Andy, Captain Sog, Charles. Hi, Charles. Dementor, Gimpy B, Jay, who's supposed to be here but isn't. Jason, who's not the Jason you're thinking of. John, Julius, Linuxis666, who's a guy who I've been chatting with on Twitter for a very long time, and he's finally become a patron, so thank you very much for that. Mark with a C. Hi, Mark. Mark with a K.
Hi, Mark.
And Ryan, who's also a relatively new patron. So thank you, all of you, for your patronage. Exactly, that's what that is. We're making something like, before the Patreon tax and whatever transfer fees PayPal charges me, we're making like $70, which is awesome. That covers covers all of the show's expenses, and even has me considering, maybe once we get a little bit more on the patron side, paying for StreamYard, which we're using to do this broadcast, which would let us do a few more things with StreamYard, including getting rid of their logo at the top of the broadcast here, putting in our own backgrounds, and a few other neat little things. But it's like $20 a month, and I haven't committed to that yet because it's a lot of money for those few little features. But at any rate, it's a good thing. So thank you. It
would also let us host that live rewatch of The Room, which apparently Mark is volunteering to host.
Ugh, my son made me watch it. Oh my God, it's so bad.
What are we talking about? Did I miss something here?
You did. Don't worry about it.
Terrible movie that if you've never seen it, don't.
It's called The Room? Is that what it's called?
Room.
Yeah, Tommy Wiseau made it. Oh, it's so bad.
It is not the most inept movie I've ever seen, but it is certainly in the running.
I've seen some bad movies. So Charles, knowing what I know about the sort of movies that you watch, would you watch it or would you not?
Well, I have seen it. I saw it at B-Fest. I saw it at Steel Stacks, and I've fallen asleep in front of it in my own home. So
okay.
I have seen it.
I saw it once under protest in my own home.
If you're any kind of connoisseur of B films or worse, then it's certainly a landmark, and it's bad enough that it had its own movie made about it.
Yeah, it's called The Disaster Artist. And calling it a B movie is kind. It's probably closer to a D, E, or even approaching F.
Well, the funny thing is that in a way, it actually has fairly high production values, just in terms of like the money that was spent to make it. But yeah, the
script. Yeah,
it's got problems.
It's got many problems. So, and Nate's going to go run out and watch it after he plays a couple of rounds of Fortnite.
Yeah, right. Right. I've probably played 15 minutes of Fortnite my entire life, so I don't know if I'd count on that. So, Mark, you may not know this, but that B-Fest that Charles has mentioned, yearly he goes to revel in the art that is B-movies.
And where's this reveling occur?
This it's been since the early 1980s. It is hosted on the campus of Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois, and it is 24 hours, mostly uninterrupted, of bad movies. You get about 14, squeeze about 14 to 15 movies into a 24-hour period. Plan 9 from Outer Space is shown at midnight.
Yeah, that's appropriate. And that's a good midnight movie.
I think Plan 9 is actually pretty great as far as these things go.
I find Plan 9 more tolerable than The Room, to be honest. But yeah.
Oh God, yes.
So, when is BFET? Was it moved this year or canceled this year because of the?
It was held in early February. It's really one of the last things I did before it kind of went to hell. It was good this year.
Okay.
Good lineup. No, for given values of good.
Yeah, well, no. I mean, obviously, you know what you're getting into when you go there, right? So good fits within that lens, right?
Well, I'll tell you what, Flash Gordon really brought down the house.
Yeah.
Love that movie.
Great movie.
That movie was on HBO about 1 billion times when I was in high school, and we got it on VH. You know, we recorded it to VHS, and we just used Flash. I don't even consider that a bad movie. It's just a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, Gordon's
alive. Yeah.
That's the thing about B movies, though. They generally are fun as long as you're not coming into it expecting a good movie or a great movie, I should say. You know?
But there's certainly a continuum there of like entertaining versus cringy. Like for cringy, like the early '80s comedy with Andy Kaufman and Bernadette Peters, Heartbeats.
Heartbeats.
Have not seen that one.
They play robots.
I figured from the title is something like that.
The thing about a bad comedy is, almost by definition, a bad comedy is not funny.
Yeah, well, it's not supposed to be at that point, right? If it's a bad comedy.
Well, it was supposed to be, but it wasn't.
It was supposed to be funny, but it wasn't. Okay.
Awkward.
Yeah. Okay, so I don't think I have anything else in the way of announcements. I did not find any new reviews this week. Yeah, I know. Sad trombone. That's something I need for the soundboard. In fact, maybe I'll just take that recording right there out of this show and make that the clip of Mark going womp womp.
Yeah, you really got to work on the soundboard. There should be dozens of buttons you can hit.
Listen, the number of times I've used any of the sound clips other than the transition music has been very low.
So
historically,
I'll make a standing offer to do a recording session with you of me doing various, various clips so that you can just be on the soundboard.
I don't know. That sounds like a great and terrible idea at the same time.
Great and terrible. Those are the best ideas. The great and terrible ideas.
Okay. All right. So, at any rate, that covers all of the usual housekeeping stuff. You guys have anything fun going on? I see you put some notes in here. Charles, you go first. Something about documenting the outdoors.
Yeah, so...
I love the domain name, only because I know the story behind it.
Yeah. So something I started doing is I've always liked bicycling, but, it was easier when I lived in Michigan because Michigan is in general flat and eastern Pennsylvania is not. But
you get used to it.
Right, but now that we're kind of cooped up, one of the few things that we can really do and enjoy is outdoor exercise. Mm-hmm. So I've taken to biking after work every day and also on the weekends. I'm doing an average of 9 to 10 miles a day. There's a lot of good rail and canal trails in the area that I live in. And I've just been taking every day that I go out, I'm taking pictures of things that catch my interest. At this point, there's a lot of repetition. because there's just certain things I photograph very often because there's only so many different places.
Yeah, you've only got so many routes you can follow, right? Yeah.
But so I've been doing it really since the beginning, and I have how many? 4, 3, 4, 6, 7. Yeah, almost like 30 days worth, just organized by day. Pictures of just where I've been, and you can see, for example, the landscape greening over the last month and change. Things
Yeah.
bloom, and some days it's clear, some days it's cloudy.
Over these wonderful 90 days of smarch.
Indeed.
Yes. So I recognize some of these pictures from my time in Easton when I was working down there, and some of them were places I liked to go that were like within walking distance of the office whenever I was just having a bad day or something. Mm-hmm. So good stuff.
So that's something I do, and it's just become part of my routine. So the link to that gallery, just a subset of my hosted galleries, is in the show notes. And following along and just seeing a little bit of the outdoors in eastern Pennsylvania.
Surprise! I see lots of trains in the upper.
Trains are awesome.
Well, by interesting coincidence, any number of these bike trails follow active railway lines, so trains do show up from time to time.
That's not a coincidence. Admit it. So, Mark, another thing you may not know about Charles is that he's a train enthusiast. Is
Trains
enthusiast
awesome.
the right word, or should it be a higher level than enthusiast?
I think rail fan is the non-pejorative descriptor these days.
Okay.
Rail
fan.
I used to have model trains growing up. My dad had an N-scale railroad, and I had an HO one. And one of the virtual reality games I have actually lets you build your own model railroad using either from scratch, using templates. And then this is the cool part, because it's virtual reality, you can jump into the locomotive and drive it.
Awesome.
Oh, cool.
So that's awesome.
Yeah. I model in N, but I haven't been working on it in a while.
Yeah. I always think about putting a layout up again, but it's just something I've thought about, haven't done.
Yeah, every year my dad and I used to set up an HO gauge layout right around Christmas time. It was just like a tradition we had, and I loved it, and I still would, to be honest. I don't have any room to set the thing up because HO is not tiny, right? It's not like huge either. It's just big enough that you need a good 8x8 space to really set something up, and I just don't have it. I don't have the room. But yeah, I used to love that, and I'd love to share that with my own kids now, but we just don't have the space for it. That's it. I got to buy a new house, bigger house, so I can set up trains.
Sounds legit.
Yeah.
That's what I would do.
I need a bigger workshop, a bigger garage, and a place to set up trains, and then I'll be happy. So, right. I had a thought about something I was going to talk about. Now I forget what it was. Oh, my wife and I have started running. It's like just this week that we started it, but I don't like viewers may not know this, but I ran in high school and I used to really enjoy it. But I was never big on the competing part, and without a competition to train for, it's really easy to fall out of running, and I fell out of running and I just never got back into it. And we've tried over the years to sort of get back to it just for the fitness aspect of it. And my wife just all of a sudden came to me and said that she'd like to start running. So I'm like, absolutely, let's do that, because I could use some exercise too, especially now that I work from here and I don't even really walk as much as I used to anymore. So we started. There's a well-documented program called Couch to 5K, which is basically a 90-day program that's supposed to get you from like couch fitness, like I sit on the couch all day sort of fitness, up to being able to run a 5K. So we started that this week, and hopefully we can stick with it this time, and we can actually, I don't know if we're ever going to compete or not, but I don't know. I'm enjoying it. Hopefully she's enjoying it, and we'll keep going with that.
Yeah, I try to walk every day, at least after lunch, and maybe after lunch and dinner. But about the only time I run is if I think I'm being chased by a bear. But
I get that a lot.
I do measure my steps, right?
Yeah.
And I calculate the calories I'm eating, because I'm trying to. I ended up sick a few weeks back. Nate knows about this, and one of the accidental benefits is I lost all the weight I put on during vacation and then some. So I'm like, whoa, I'm just going to take advantage of this because I had no appetite for almost 2 weeks. And I definitely feel better when I walk. And my I got the diabetes, which my doctor would like me to weigh less. So that's a good thing. But I looked at from couch to 5K, but the running aspect frightens me a little bit. I don't think I'm a runner.
My wife is not a runner.
Okay.
And she never has been, right? Like this is like, for me, this is a thing that I can easily jump back into. I'm out of shape, but I know how.
Well, round is shape.
Well, no, I mean like because I have experience running, it's easy to get back into the
right,
endurance, right? The endurance aspect of running, where she's never done that. So for her, it's all new, right? And she's doing good with it. She's actually really enjoying it so far. It starts out by running like an interval thing, where you walk for a minute and a half and then you run for 60 seconds, and you walk for 90 seconds and you run for 60 seconds, and back and forth and back and forth. And you do that like 8 times in a session, and then that's your first week. You do that 3 days of the first week, and then I haven't looked yet, but I'm sure that ramps up as it goes on. That's how this is going to work. Yeah. Well, yeah, you're never going to get the 5K going that way. So it's going to ramp up as time goes on. So maybe next week we'll be running 90 seconds instead of 60. I don't know. I haven't looked at it. But I'm finding it really easy to get started. She's finding it easy enough to get used to the idea of running. We even have our kids coming with us, so they're doing okay with it, right? So, and I mean, kids obviously have endless energy, so.
I like a trooper set. I do enthusiastic walking. Like I don't do lazy walking. I do honestly Jersey fast paced walking.
The thing with running is, and this is obvious, this is like a proven thing, it's bad for your knees, right? So like that's the big downside to running. It's great for lots of other things. It's really bad for your knees. So there's people that ran for most of their lives and they're like, I can't do it anymore. I had to stop because my knees are so bad, right? So I'm not going to say that running is for everybody. If you'd rather walk, like power walk or bike, like Charles is doing, those are all great ways to do it as well, that are less damaging on your knees. So
I like walking because there's no equipment involved, and I say hi to the dogs in the neighborhood as I go by. I know most of their names now.
Yeah,
it's an easy exercise to do, and the Fitbit counts my steps, and then I get more calories to eat yummy stuff.
Yeah.
What I like about biking is I just see more of the world. I can go further afield and
I understand.
I like walking, and
I just don't own a modern bike either, so that I don't feel like buying one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So at any rate,
good for
Mark.
you guys though. I'm glad to hear that you got exercise is important, and I neglected exercise for way too long in my life. I will admit that.
I mean, so have I at this point.
And yeah, it is. It's easy to get. Honestly, I'm at the point where I'm like, oh my God, I've been stuck in this chair for too long, inside too long. I need to go for a walk.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I just feel better.
I've been doing that probably since I started working from home when I moved to Red Hat. It's when I worked at the college, it was really easy to just step away from my desk, even if it's just to walk out and get some lunch, or just go for a quick walk, a 15-minute walk around town or whatever. And I mean, Charles, you and I had walked down to the river a few times, like just because it's a nice place to go, like hang out, clear your head, and get back to the office, right?
Yeah.
I don't really get that here, so I have to force myself to get up and sort of get out of the house.
The funny thing is that at Red Hat, you won't ever get in trouble if you just flag yourself AFK and vanish for 45 minutes. No one's going to give a crap.
Yeah.
Especially if you have your phone with you, because if a customer calls, they'll call you on your phone.
Right.
But yeah, the same thing, right? You feel a little guilty about getting up, and even like there'll be days I ate lunch at my desk because I'm but I don't have to. I could eat lunch upstairs in the kitchen, and probably should do it that way.
Right. I eat at my desk too.
But I sometimes am like watching YouTube or whatever. Other stuff.
I try to do something other than work over lunch at least, even if I'm at my desk. All right. So Mark, you put in a note in here that you're smoking meat.
Yeah. So
surprise.
So one of the things, my lovely wife got me a big green egg for Father's Day last year, and oh my God, it is a magical device, and I have added things to it, such as the Flame Boss, the Big Green Egg branded Flame Boss that's Wi-Fi capable. It's a fan that you can set the temperature using your smartphone, and it'll hold the grill at that temperature perfectly. But I refuse to like order ribs and stuff like that at restaurants anymore because I'm a total snob now because mine are better. So I ended up having a little vacation the other day. We found there's a local meat place, Nello's Specialty Meats in Nazareth. Oh my God, they had a family special, and so I went over on Monday, and I joked with Sharon. It was like getting out of the house and going to Nello's Specialty Meats felt almost as joyful to me as when we stepped on the ship in Smarch on our Disney cruise. It was almost because I'm like, I'm out of my house. It's a gorgeous day. I'm seeing other people.
Yeah, right.
But this place was like meat heaven. So I picked up a pork butt and made it yesterday to make shredded pork, and it was head and shoulders above the supermarket pork I've been doing on the egg.
I'd imagine.
So, oh yeah, unreal. So now I have a new meat place, but I put a picture of the the butt linked in the show notes. But smoking meat, yeah, I just it's become a thing now. It's something I really love doing. And you can do regular grilling with the egg too. You don't have to do the slow cooking. You can make pizza on it. You can do all sorts of crazy stuff. It's really, really pretty wonderful.
Pizza on the grill. Is this little wire coming out of there like a temperature sensor? Is that what that is?
So let me look at the picture. Yeah. So it
looks like you've put like a bike lock on your food, but I assume that's not what that is.
That's not a bike lock. That's
like a laptop lock.
That is the Flame Boss has two sensors. That sensor is in the meat to detect the temperature. There's another sensor off camera that tells me the temperature of the grill itself, and it uses that to control when it blows air or not. And
That's
then there's a drip pan under it.
Yeah, I figured that must be what that is.
Yeah, but this was almost 5 pounds, and it was just amazing. This is not my wife's favorite style of meat, but it was so good that even she actually liked it.
Cool.
So, yeah. So, shout out to Nello's. Woo! I threatened them on Facebook that I'm going to come back and buy all their pork butts.
Come back and buy all their meat.
Buy all the butts. Yeah. Well, we've had a few of the pieces from our order, and it's all amazing. So if you're near Nazareth, they're a great place for meat.
Cool.
Plug over.
All right, so we have news to cover. May as well get into that, huh?
Da news.
Here we go.
Ooh, are we done yet?
There you go.
The music. By the way, and so this is just a slight continuation. I think one of the reasons I like smoking meat so much is there's a lot of hobbies that are not nerd specific, but feel like they're nerd hobbies. And to me, the meat smoking is one of them because you've got things to measure and techniques. And stuff
right,
like that.
Right.
So it's a nerd-friendly hobby.
Cooking in general is like viewed as this like the women do that kind of thing, right? Or at least it used to in the old days when there were like these set roles for men and women. And cooking is really it can be very like scientific, right? Because there's a lot going on there. It's like chemistry mixed in with it really is. So yeah, I remember like 15, 20 years ago when Alton Brown had his Good Eats show, just watching him describe the science behind cooking it's just amazing stuff. It's really cool stuff.
It's amazing stuff.
I don't know. Does he still have that show? He may. I don't know. I know he right around the time when everybody was panicking about the initial coronavirus outbreaks, and everyone's talking about hand washing. He did a video that went all around social media about how he washes his hands because it's all this very methodical, like how you get all the surfaces on your hands and what kind of soap works better and how he does it when he's traveling. And, obviously you're not supposed to be traveling now, but this is just like a thing that he's always done. He carries his own bar of soap with him in a little tin. And yeah, it's an interesting video to watch. Speaking of interesting things related to, kind of related to coronavirus, anybody who's on social media, at least on Facebook, I don't know if this is as big a deal on other media outlets like Twitter or like LinkedIn or whatever, but there's no end to the conspiracy theories going around about what's really behind coronavirus, because it couldn't possibly just be the story that everyone's telling us. It has to be some nefarious plot. All of a sudden, on my news feed on Facebook, I started seeing Bill Gates' name getting mentioned over and over and over again, and about how he wants to kill off half of the U.S. population, and how he wants to track us all with a vaccine. And I'm like, what? Where did this all come from? And as I was looking for news for today, an article that popped up in my Google alerts that I get, because I have one triggered on Microsoft, because I like to follow whatever news Microsoft is all about. For the show, obviously, that's a valid topic for us to talk about on Hiring Sysadmin. A Snopes article shows up. Does Microsoft own patent number 666 about implanting microchips in people? So apparently there's along with this, Bill Gates wants to track people with his vaccine. They've made up a story about how Microsoft owns a patent that is patent number 666, which, by the way,
that would be like a steam-powered hoe.
Yeah, right. So how old is the U.S. Patent Office, and how quickly do you think they got to the number 666? And with how superstitious people were back then, do you think they even used the number? Right.
So, well, don't get me going on eschatology. That nonsense where the Left Behind crap, that didn't actually hit until the 19th century.
Okay.
So it's garbage anyway. But you can see my Catholic is talking now. Bye-bye. I'll stop.
So at any rate, it's so I'm going to go through Snopes's synopsis here. Let me find it here. They say it's mostly false, which to me was like, wait, what do you mean mostly?
Mostly. It should actually be bullshit, but
Right. So when you read this, you'll be like, yes, it's false. Microsoft published a patent for a cryptocurrency system using body activity data. So I don't know what that patent's all about, but I guess you could construe that to say I'm tracking people. This patent is filed under the number W02020060606A1. And it says the number W, the number I just read off, contains 3 6s, but it's obviously not the same as 666. It says this patent focuses on body tracking data via wearable technology, such as a smartwatch, like the one I'm wearing, like a lot of people are wearing, and makes no mention of implanted microchips. So, basically, as you might expect, the thing that's floating around Facebook about Microsoft owning patent number 666, I haven't actually seen this one, but and how they're tracking people with it, false.
I liked it better when Bill Gates, and this is probably 20 years ago, I liked it better when Bill Gates was going to pay us for forwarding the email.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was a friendlier Bill Gates then, not trying to force his evil vaccines on us to turn us to give us the mark of the beast.
What's really funny is and I've mentioned this whole duality or whatever with my social presence before on the podcast. It's so I obviously am in the technology space professionally, right? So a lot of my personal stuff is about technology, and I have a lot of friends who are in technology, whatever. I also enjoy outdoors, hunting, fishing, and jeeping. And I have a lot of friends that are on that side, right? And these two types of people, whether you want to call it stereotyping or not, they're just different sorts of people, right?
Oh, yeah.
And all the people on this side, which is the side of all my Jeep friends and hunting friends and whatever, there's a very large subset of those people that are throwing around all these conspiracy theories. I don't know what it is about that group of people that are so easily convinced that there has to be some nefarious plot behind all of this, right?
I've got a similar friends duality as you do.
Right. It's I'm assuming you're seeing a similar thing then, right? The people on the technology side are generally just like, yeah, there's a virus, it sucks, right? And we got to stay at home to avoid getting sick.
It's my
and the people on the other side are like, I'm not wearing a freaking mask. I don't care if the governor says so.
So I'll spell what is that booming? Is that from here? Or?
That's me. Whenever I bump my desk.
Oh, okay. I'm like,
it's thunder.
Or
Do
someone
you hear
something
the
up?
thunder?
Yeah.
Anyway, now that I've distracted everybody.
No.
But these conspiracy theories, I mean, I guess the place I was going with this was like, all of a sudden I see all of the people, a lot of people from that group of people. And honestly, out of the hundreds of people that group may be, even in my own friends list, there's like 5 or 6 of them that are spouting this stuff, right? So it's not all of them.
It's the super conservative / super evangelical types that get sucked into that stuff. Because I see the same fact.
Now, all of a sudden, those people are talking about Bill Gates and how we all have to hate Bill Gates because Bill Gates is going to track all the people and what? Huh? What's
the command to...
It's about Minecraft, isn't it? Come on, spit it out. It's like set time day.
Set time day or time set day?
It's one or the other.
Use the Google.
Use the Google. Mark says to use the Google.
That's a good segue.
We're
Google.
live.
I use Google to find the U.S. Patent Office.
Kiara doesn't care that we're live, I guess.
No. Hang on a sec.
Close
the door. Thank you.
I used Google to go to the U.S. Patent Office website and actually look up what patent number 666 is.
Is it a steam-powered hoe?
Please be a steam-powered hoe. Please be a steam-powered. What is it?
It is a door latch.
The door latch. All right. Is it the door latch that we all use?
That's even more basic.
And I have placed a link in the notes.
Is it the little eye? Is it the little eye with the hook? You swing the hook into the little eyelet, or is it like the sliding bolt thing? Like what is it?
That thing is of the devil. It's obviously of the
little
devil.
eyelet thing.
Okay.
Now I gotta look.
That door latch.
The link's in the Google Doc. If you want to go see what this thing is.
Oh, it's more like a conventional door latch, but it's like a friggin' doorknob almost.
Nice. So at any rate,
patented in 1838.
Wow, look,
it could have been a steam-powered hoe.
Could have been a steam-powered hoe.
Steam-powered hoe, I want to clarify this.
Yeah.
The thing you would use to till a field, that kind of hoe.
Yes, not the other kind of hoe.
Yeah. Okay. Just so we're clear.
So to tie this all back together, the thing I was trying to get at with hating Bill Gates is like all of a sudden all these people that have nothing to do with technology are talking about Bill Gates and how the world needs to hate Bill Gates because he's trying to kill off people or he's trying to implant us all with microchips or something. And I'm like, listen, 20 years ago I hated Bill Gates before it was cool.
For good reasons, though.
Yeah. Back when he was trying to when he was like the robber baron of the IT world.
And did actual damage and took actual companies out.
Yes. Yeah. So, yeah. It's like, I feel you, but I'm having trouble hating Bill Gates nowadays because, like, with all the good that he's doing, with all the money he's earned over the years, right?
Yeah.
At least I feel like he is anyway, with the Gates Foundation and stuff like that. And we'll talk about them later.
If anything, he's maybe trying to make up for all the lives he destroyed with his bad business practices, but I doubt
it could be.
It
could be.
Ballmer's still a bigger asshole, but yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Mr. Linux is a cancer.
Yeah, we won, Steve. We won.
Indeed. Indeed. So anyway, moving on from that little rant. All right, we've got The Motley Fool, and this is the article that we had trouble reading because we all tried to, like, our brains fell asleep reading it.
This is about the
cloud-based collaboration.
Cloud-based collaboration.
So
isn't that kind of what we're doing now?
Right.
Yeah.
So the title of the article is "This is the next big opportunity in tech, and Microsoft is leading the pack." Now, I have to admit, I couldn't either my brain shut off or I couldn't find it in the article. I can't figure out why they're saying Microsoft is leading the pack. But
based on it looks like they're claiming the number of daily users.
okay. So it says cloud-based collaboration and video conferencing are quickly becoming a surprisingly important market, and
which is news to no one, by the way.
Exactly.
This is like let's state the friggin' obvious.
This is why I wanted to include the article tonight, because I thought it'd be a good talking point, simply to say, yeah, right now, cloud-based collaboration is really important because we're all locked in our houses. Like we're not locked in. Yeah, we're not supposed to really be out going to the workplace, right? So there's a lot of people working remotely. There's a lot of people that need to depend on these tools. Is that really going to last after the country is reopened?
I think we're going to start having people lose their friggin' minds in May.
Yeah.
Or as we'll call it, Schmay.
Yeah. We're kind of seeing it already with some of these protests that are going on, don't you think?
Right. And depending on who you talk to, and hopefully this isn't conspiracy theory fueled, if they've got the action, if there might be far more people who caught the Rona than we thought, which actually makes the death rate comparable to flu. And if the actual mortality rate is comparable to flu, then there's no reason to continue this current charade.
Yeah, I was reading.
If that's a lot of ifs.
Yeah.
No, there is.
The antibodies test.
Let's say how many ifs are we stacking up there?
Yeah. Well, I was reading.
It's a nested if statement, Charles. There's no doubt to that. Which is why we need the antibodies test as soon as possible. Because I might have gotten the Rona. My wife might have too. We're not sure.
I was reading an article the other day, and I forget. I think it was one of these smaller, like lower populated
cloud-based collaboration, by the way. So.
No, it has to do with the mortality rate and coronavirus. I was reading this article. It was a smaller populated continent, like Iceland or something.
Was that the article that pissed a lot of people on your Facebook off?
I don't think so. Hang on,
you had a lively thread there.
Oh yeah, that was a different one.
Didn't read the whole thing.
That was a different one.
This was
an article where they had taken a country or a continent, I think, that had a lower population, so it was like feasible to test everybody, right? And they gave everybody a test for coronavirus to see who had it and who didn't. And apparently 80% of the population had it.
Had the Rona.
Was it 80% that had it? No, it was 80% that had it and showed zero symptoms.
Yeah.
So 80% of the people that tested positive showed zero symptoms, right? So I guess that would mean 20% actually had symptoms, and I don't know what the death rate is out of all of that. But that means that you can't, like right now, we're basing all these numbers on, you don't get a test, you don't get confirmed to have had coronavirus unless you've seen a doctor because you had symptoms or because you couldn't breathe or, whatever, right? So if there's a very large number of people that are exposed to coronavirus, catch coronavirus, show zero symptoms or show mild symptoms, and they never go get tested, I can't imagine there's any way they're counting these people, right?
No.
So again, back to what you're saying, it could be that these numbers are way off, but again, you don't know that for sure until everyone's been checked.
And there's a related problem, which is what they're starting to see is people who were more or less asymptomatic but had it also have actually incurred lung damage that manifests in certain cases and like blood clotting issues. So you're seeing people who previously didn't have much in the way of symptoms suffering strokes. So really just the bottom line there.
That muddies the water a bit too, yeah.
Yeah, there's bottom line is it is a relatively new disease. We don't know a lot about it, and unfortunately, we don't currently have the testing infrastructure. We don't have data. We're trying to make decisions. Like we're doing this extreme thing because watch me tie this back. We don't know really anything about the system in question, which in this case is like the public health of the country. So until we learn something about it, we got to put everything on lockdown, which is not fun.
Right. Right.
Nobody
I mean,
is enjoying this.
yeah, I'm not advocating for like, oh my God, we should take away all these various bans and whatnot that we've put in place. We do need to understand all this better, though. And I tell you what, there's going to be people very upset if it turns out that all this was for naught. And it turns out that like, oh, the whole population's already been exposed anyway, right?
But we didn't know. I mean, it's like Y2K.
Right. Right.
We spent billions on Y2K mitigation. The world didn't end, and people's like, look at all that wasted money. It's like, all right,
Yeah.
what's our control group?
It did that work. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, well, that's exactly the thing that people are trying to tout now. It's like, okay, we did all these things. The curve is flattening. That's expected. That's not by chance. That's why we did all this, right? So there's going to be a lot of people at the end of this, just like there's a lot of people thinking that Bill Gates is trying to microchip and track all of us. There's going to be a lot of people at the end of this going like, why did we shut down the country? It didn't turn out to be all that bad. Well, it wasn't all that bad because we shut down the country. Yeah. So, yeah.
It's a tough one.
Yeah. So, at any rate, I don't know. The Motley Fool is generally a trusted source for, this sort of futures, or not futures, that's what I'm looking for, prediction sort of tracking. But I don't know.
So they're basically saying Microsoft's going to win, which I've never used Teams in my life.
Neither have I. And it's not just Teams. I think it's like they're including, because they compare it to Google Drive and Google Meet, not just the conferencing software, but the collaboration software. So in this case, you're talking about Office 365 along with Teams and stuff like that.
I was going to say, for us, we're a G Suite shop, so for us, it's a mix. Predominantly, we're doing Google Meet conferencing. And I have to say, Meet as a product has improved markedly over the last couple of weeks. And Slack calls. Really, on the educational side, they're using Zoom. But there's a limited number of Zoom Pro licenses, and Zoom has some features like breakout rooms that are really great for the educational settings. So we've prioritized the Pro licenses for the academic side of the house, and for admin meetings, we're using Meet.
I didn't know Zoom had breakout meetings.
I had no idea.
Like, I didn't know that was a feature. And then, so my daughters are Girl Scouts, right? Because of the age difference, they're in two different levels of Girl Scouts, right? One's a brownie and one's a junior, right? However they name stuff in Girl Scouts. The scout leader is using Zoom to hold their meetings, right? But because they're in different levels, they're supposed to be separated, right? So she's like, oh, we're going to do breakout rooms. And I'm like, you're going to do what? What now? Like, I work in IT. I use Zoom all the freaking time. You're going to, what? What's a breakout room? I learned something from my Girl Scout teacher, or Scoutmaster. I thought that was kind of funny.
That's funny.
So, yeah, collaboration. Guess what? It's a thing. Online collaboration. It's important during a pandemic. I don't know that it will be. I mean, it's still important because all of us were.
All of us were using this. Most of us tech nerds are using this every day anyway.
Yeah, right. So
it's like all the people who aren't us, though, have suddenly been dragged into this world. So we'll see how much of it sticks.
So, I mean, I guess that is valid, right? So just like you were saying, how you have instructors or professors, I'm sorry, I wouldn't want to use the word instructors and and slight them of their degree. The professors that you dealt with that were previously not using your Moodle platform, right? And now they are because they have to, right? They don't have any choice. Will that stick, right? Once all these restrictions are lifted and the kids are physically back on campus, are they going to keep using Moodle, or are they going to be like, oh, I hated using that crap, well, I had to do it, and they're going to go back to doing the way they were with their VHS tapes? And
well, I mean, honestly, a lot of that just depends on what happens with the fall 2020 term.
Yeah, right.
Like, it's one thing to do what amounts to triage and throwing things online just to maintain some kind of continuity, but you're starting to see some schools already saying, well, we're going to do our fall 2020 term online just because of the uncertainty. And so that means going in, which means you actually have the time, as obnoxious as it is, to rebuild a lesson plan and actually be a little more purposeful.
Right.
Because there's the opportunity to do it.
Man, I'm hoping they don't. I'm hoping Stevens has classes because, like I was saying before the show, my son's starting his freshman year at Stevens, and I really want him to have that experience.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Yep. So, moving along, Tech Radar, and this is more or less we're closing the loop on a thread that's been going on
Nate's
Iron
favorite
Sysadmin for several years at this point. You may remember that like a year and a half or 2 years ago.
He was just blamed before the show started.
Yeah, right. We talked about how Fortnite, the people who make Fortnite, Epic Games, right? They were not going. They're not putting Fortnite on the Android market because they don't want to pay Google every time somebody downloads or purchases add-ons through Fortnite, because that's the way this works, right? Google lets you put your app on there. If your app is for pay, they get a cut of all your profits, which is, that's how they make money on the Google market or on the Google Play Store. Well, Epic Games said, like, nope, we're not going to do that. We're going to release an APK, which is, for those of you non-Android users, an APK is basically a package of an app for Android. All the pieces are in there, and you put it on your phone, and it runs from there, similar to how the way Apple packages things up into little, how you can just drag an icon onto your desktop, and now you've got the program. Well, that's how an APK works. Well, you can distribute those to Android without using the Google Play Store. The only problem is they're not signed. And any Android device that has the Google Store on it, or not Google Store, I keep using that word, it's the Google Play Store, has a certificate in place that matches the signature on the app so that you'll know if it is a trusted, quote-unquote, application that has been scanned and gone through whatever rigors or an app is supposed to go through to make sure that it's safe to be on the Google Play Store. Rigors, indeed. I
suspect most of those rigors have to do with writing a check.
Yeah, right. We won't talk at the moment about how lots of applications have gotten past those rigors, right, and still get malicious software onto the Play Store. And
although you kind of just did.
Yeah,
sort of.
Right. But I mean, that happens in both marketplaces. It also happens on iOS, so it's not an Android-only thing. My point is, they didn't want to pay the money, so they were just telling people, download the APK right from our website. Go into your phone settings, and that thing in there that says only install applications from known sources, just uncheck that. You don't need it. Install our game, right? Which, of course, our opinion on that was that's a terrible idea. Don't do that because it opens you up to lots of other nefarious apps. Because if you're not installing signed apps, you don't know where they came from, right? They haven't been tested.
To inquiry, to pull it, Mr. Data, inquiry.
Sure.
Can you change the setting, download the unsigned app, and then change the setting back, and the app will still run?
You could, yes.
Okay.
But
because you could drop dropping the shield, so you could be in the landing party backup.
Okay. You know how end users work, Mark.
No, they're lazy. They're terrible.
How many people turn that back on?
The shields would stay down, and then the Klingons will just hit your bridge, and you're dead.
They would put the shields down to beam Riker back on board, and then just fly off into an asteroid.
Yeah. No, yeah. I'm just axing.
Yeah.
Just axing.
So yes, that could work. So the point I was getting at was that's the discussion we had a year and a half or 2 years ago. There was another article maybe a few months ago where Epic was basically saying, like, look, we're not getting enough Android users. We might just have to go ahead and put it on the Play Store and eat that.
Which excited you because you were using the Android again at that point.
Yeah, well, again, I do not play Fortnite. I don't know why you keep saying that. Even my kids don't play Fortnite. It's like it's on the Switch and it's been used a bit and that's it. They're not like the Fortnite addicts you see everywhere. Okay. So anyway,
if you're not on the video, Nate's flossing right now.
All right, you're off the show, Mark. Bye.
Oh, no! I figured out what buttons I have to press.
That didn't last long. So anyway, all that lead up to say Tech Radar has an article. Fortnite for Android is finally on the Play Store after Epic Games yields to Google. I'm picturing Google standing there with a giant claymore and Epic Games on their knees going, please, please save the crops. Anyway.
Except Epic will make a metric ton of money from all the 12-year-olds with Google devices that will be buying their skins.
Right. So the whole reason that they're doing this, the reason they finally caved, I'm sure,
because they like money,
is because they want people to install their game, and they realized the thing that we predicted 2 years ago, that you're not going to get people to install your game if you have to if you have to go through like this whole rigmarole to get your game installed, right? People just want to go to the Play Store, click the button, and have your game.
Is Fortnite even still a thing? Still, I'm going to ask the Google app.
I'm sure it is. You're going to find like images of 12-year-olds flossing but anyway. That's probably it. Sales are probably down, and they're like, oh, we got to bolster this Android thing.
Well, there was an article written in early Smarch that says that you've still got a lot of players every night. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, huh.
Early Smarch.
At the end of the article here, it says, of course, it's worth noting that Apple's App Store policies operate in almost an identical fashion to Google's. And all this time, Fortnite has been available on iOS devices, but Epic didn't have a choice. They had to do it on Apple because
they're before Zod immediately.
Right. There is no check mark to remove on your Apple device unless you jailbreak the phone, and no one's going to go through that just to get Fortnite. And
Karen, the soccer mom, has the iOS device, so that
right.
So yeah.
Right.
So that's what Jackson's playing on.
Jackson.
With his soccer haircut.
Yeah. It's funny because my wife coaches soccer and our kids both play soccer. And now you're jabbing at the soccer kids too.
I'm jabbing at the rich soccer kids from Nazareth. Maybe it's
our kids are not the rich soccer kids, that's for dang sure. Okay.
I jab at everybody, you know that.
Yeah, right. So moving on to an article that I don't think any of us read because Jason added it and then couldn't make it to the show.
We could just skip it.
Yeah, we could, but I'll at least give you guys the headline, just like the mainstream media will do. So this is from NBC News because the article that he shared with us from the Washington Post required you to subscribe to read it, and
Washington Post. It wouldn't even the DNS entry wouldn't even resolve
whether you like paying for news or not. I wanted to put a link in here that you could actually click on without having to pay anybody for. So anyway, logins of WHO, that's the World Health. Yeah, the World Health Organization. The Gates Foundation employees circulate on the
666
on the fringes of the internet. I am trying to. You guys are speaking over top now. Logins of the Who, which is that band from the 70s. The Gates Foundation employees circulate on the fringes of the internet. Now, I don't know where the fringes of the internet are because I didn't read the article thoroughly enough
backyard near my
to tell. It could certainly be like the dark web or something, or just paste bin. I don't know, but apparently a lot of let's see, analysis of the information found it had likely been collected from previous breaches, a practice that is not uncommon on the internet's black market for data. So basically, at some point,
4chan.
Yeah, that's the fringe.
4chan's now a right-wing extremist forum. When did that happen?
Because of QAnon.
Yeah.
I kid you not. I forget if I talked about this on the show, but like a month and a half or 2 months ago, I was called for jury duty, right? Mm-hmm. And so I report to the courthouse like a good citizen, and they ended up dismissing us because the case got thrown out. But as I'm sitting there in the courtroom waiting for them to give us our like initial jury training, right, and tell us what we're supposed to be doing.
Jury training, sir!
There's two women behind me, and they're having this conversation about the World Ho organizers. Thank you, Trooper Ish.
That was
great.
That was
Is it a steam-powered World Ho organizer?
You bet. Team Howard Host.
Anyway,
the show
there's
finally eats itself.
There's these two women sitting behind me who are so.
Steve
I
Howard
always
Host?
like I envision 4chan as like this sort of there's like an in crowd of people that go visit 4chan. People that
Mostly
know
14.
about 4chan. Everyone else doesn't care about it, right? No one cares about 4chan because it's like this little corner of the internet where like dank memes get shared and horrible pornography is shared and no one else cares, right? People that are interested in those things go there. People that are like in the security industry and whatever may go there to like keep up to date on stuff and whatever, but otherwise no one cares about 4chan. Well, there's these two just I don't know how to say this without sounding demeaning, but they're just like average women. They're just people, just average citizens, right? They're not anything. They're not in IT. They're not 12-year-old boys looking for porn. They're not, right? They're not the people I would expect to know anything about 4chan. They're sitting behind me talking about, I think it was some fiasco surrounding the president. And they're like, oh, there's this guy on 4chan. They call him Q. And he says this and that, and it all comes true. And I remember hearing the only reason I know anything about this Q person is because there was an episode of Reply All where they talked about Q. They were talking about Pizzagate, if you remember Pizzagate, and like the whole supposed child pornography ring that was coming out of some pizza place in Chicago or whatever that was owned by the Clintons and like this whole big conspiracy thing. And they were all talking about Q during this because that was supposedly where this came from. So it just floored me that these two average people, like nothing against these people, just these two average people are talking about 4chan and QAnon and like chemtrails and like all the craziness that goes on 4chan, right? I don't know. I just had to share that because I just couldn't believe that this was. It was like all the. Go ahead.
I'm gonna say some things were never meant to escape from the lab, but they did.
4chan and coronavirus.
Oh, now.
So at any rate, yes, 4chan apparently is sharing a bunch of logins from the World Steam-Powered Hose organization and the Gates Foundation. Apparently, the article implies, just from the very little bit I've read, that it's not like some new breach or anything. It's a bunch of collected data from previous breaches. So how valid is this stuff? I don't know. But, here you go. It's news. If you want to go read the article, it's in the show notes. And on to our last news. I guess this is kind of like news. It's from Ars Technica. Charles, both you and Jason shared this one, right? So can you talk more intelligently about this one than I've been for this entire show?
Well,
easily.
Easily. Can you speak English? Because that's the bar right now.
I'm not sure.
Right.
I'm going to say the bar's not very high.
Complete sentences.
So, I'm not a storage expert, and I don't know that I can really do a deep dive on this. But the long and the short of it is that, Aruga. The Ars Technica was doing something of a deep dive on RAIDs, and certainly RAIDs have moved into consumer land now. With things like like actual consumer network attached storage. You
mean RAIDs like a redundant array of inexpensive disks, not RAIDs like when SWAT teams show up at your house or something.
Well,
I'm just trying to be clear.
That's sort of moved into the mainstream too, actually. But
it has.
Yes, redundant arrays of inexpensive disks.
Or is it independent disks now? I guess it used to be inexpensive. Now they're not.
Probably both. But anyway. I've got Synology NAS in my house. It's great. It does its job, and hard drive manufacturers have lines of hard drives that are specially designed for NASs, like Western Digital's Red disks. And I guess
I have a few of them in my Synology.
Same. They're great, but they're meant to run 24/7. They're kind of designed to be maybe more written to than read from, But so the specific issue here that they found then some, I guess in some Western digital disks specifically, they found that the network attached storage line was incorporating something called shingled magnetic recording, which I guess means you can have a higher storage density on the disk, but the
Performance is crappier.
Yeah, the performance is worse. And apparently, this first got noticed with people using ZFS because they were having problems actually using these disks in network attached storage because the performance was so bad.
Wow.
Like if you had a ZFS storage array, these disks would not stay in the array.
That's how bad they are.
They got punted for being bad, and they should feel bad about themselves.
They should feel bad about themselves.
So, I thought that was interesting. Like, it's a reminder that no matter how much you think you know about the technology in your house, there is a whole level of crazy that you were just like never aware of. Like, for me, for me, a drive is a commodity. Like, I don't think too hard about it.
Yeah, exactly. You buy a disk that's labeled as a NAS disk. Maybe you care about the RPMs or obviously the storage size, and that's it. That's as much as you think about it. I think a lot of people forget that a hard drive has quite a bit of firmware baked into it to make it do what it does, and that's the level that this SMR thing probably exists in. And that's all about how the data is stored. I imagine there's some level of maybe compression that could go on at that level. Maybe not. I don't know if those things are powerful enough to handle that. But yeah. I mean, I'm not surprised that this is a thing. Maybe they assumed that the redundancy in a RAID array, the fact that data is written across many disks at once would cover up for the fact that the disks are slower at performing these reads and writes, or just writes, because there's more heads writing it, right? And they thought the storage trade-off was worth it, right? Because you got to think about it, right? So drives have a finite amount of space, no matter how you're storing that data. And there's going to be a point, maybe we've already reached it, and that's why this stuff exists, where there's only so much data you can fit within a single 3.5-inch drive, right? Whether it's spinning disks or NVMe or SSD or whatever. So now they have to start playing software games to make all that stuff work, and I'm sure they've already been doing that. Sure. And this is just the next level of that, right? Yeah. It's the same deal with like CPUs and whatever. They stopped making CPU. Maybe you've noticed they've stopped making CPUs significantly faster. Like it used to be, we would go like every couple months you'd have, now we've gone from 33 megahertz to 66, now from 66 to 120, and it was like constantly doubling, right? Now they haven't gotten significantly faster. They're just getting more and more cores in them, so they're getting more dense, right?
And Intel the past 2 years has decided to, in fact, make them crappier because we have to keep turning off the acceleration thing.
Yes,
Intel had one job.
That's
exactly
it.
One job, and they screwed up.
That's exactly. But it's the same deal as this. It's the same deal as this, right? Intel thought they were being creative and trying to predict what calculation had to happen next, so that they could have it ready. So for the system to consume, right? And they thought, this is great. Now we have better performance, and this is cool. Let's bake it into all of our chips. It's awesome. What could go wrong, right?
Yeah, we'll show you.
Until bad guys were like, "Hey, what's it doing over there? What's all that? Ooh, let's grab that data."
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So, at any rate, this isn't a vulnerability necessarily, like Spectre and Meltdown were, and all of the things that have followed it since.
Yeah, this seems to be more communication from a vendor.
This is
slipping the customers the fish.
Yeah, right.
It's something to pay attention to. Just one more thing to pay attention to. Like you're buying hard drives for network attached storage, and I was actually thinking about upgrading my array, and so it's.
But it could, depending on how nerdy you are, it could easily be one of those things where, oh shit, you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly. Like you could really easily be like someone who really does know their stuff, and that you just don't know all the ins and outs of how a hard drive works, and all of a sudden you've got this poorly performing hard drive that holds 12 terabytes, but it's because of this extra layer of software that's actually making the performance abysmal.
And I'm going to be perfectly honest. Like my professional job is like, being a platform expert and stuff like that.
Mhm.
My hardware chops are not great anymore. Like
Yeah.
I used to know the hardware a lot better. And today
Yeah.
I'm just like, it's a computer. It's got flashing lights.
Yeah.
Here's the keyboard. Like I
It's
just
like-
don't know the hardware anymore.
I probably haven't built a computer in 15 years.
I
I've been
built
buying.
I built a gaming rig, but I had a nerd friend help me. Like I was
Yeah.
the Padawan. Oh,
So-
baby Yoda.
I built a gaming rig for the first time in a while last year, and like I used to always in college right after I was living that thing where I had custom case, I was replacing components, and I did all that. But yeah, I moved, that I eventually fell out of the habit. Then I had to get back into it. And yeah, I had to get advice because I'm like, wow, marketplace sure moved on in the last 10 years. How about that?
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was the same way, right? Like I could rattle off all kinds of computer hardware, what was best, and whatever. People would come to me for advice on how they should build machines and whatever. I couldn't do that anymore. Like
But what
literally,
I will say, yeah.
in fact, just like 2 weeks ago, right? I had built my dad a computer years ago, and he had me build it in such a way that it would last for several years. And now it's getting to the point where it's getting older, and there's some components that are starting to fail. He had 2 optical DVD RWs in there, and one of them failed apparently a year ago, and he didn't care because there were 2 of them. And then the other one has just recently failed, and he simply wrote me and said, like, so I need to replace these things. What should I replace them with? And I wrote back with, like, I don't know. Like, find some more SATA drives and
I don't
look at the reviews. Anyway, one of you was trying to say something before I started on that. Charles, was it you? I forget. Somebody did.
I don't
If
know.
it was, I don't remember.
Okay, sorry, I've gone off on a tangent. But anyway,
There's a tangent for sure.
and then actually to tie up the story, he came back to me. He's like, "So I found this Plex Store SATA DVD RW." I'm like, "Yeah, Plex Store. I remember that name. Buy that one."
It's got to be good. Nate remembers the name. Oh,
So yeah, hopefully that works out well because I don't know if I can salvage that one. So anyway, yes, seems like some red label drives might be slow, and I guess Western Digital did respond in here. So
They did. Like the issue is complicated. It's worth reading the article, try to wrap your head around just like everything that's going on.
yeah, cool. So that's all the news we have for tonight. I love that we have patent number 666 in the show notes now. I just closed
That is
that news and went back to the show notes and saw it sitting here.
Yeah.
And
Very
my
important.
God, what a URL!
it's
like 2 embedded URLs in one.
mighty,
Weird,
a mighty URL.
crazy URL.
We are definitely looking at a legacy content management system here.
Yeah, you think?
Where you can read the URL and figure out exactly what you're looking at without going to the page.
Yeah, right. Because all the content is embedded into the URL.
Right. Smooth move.
Yeah. So, I guess that's it for tonight.
Sounds like it's getting there.
Unless anybody has any more odd stories to share about how they don't know about hardware anymore, or if you want to
Speak for itself.
further destroy the English language like I was, or if you want to talk about steam powered hose some more, that's fine.
I think Steam Power hosts deserve their own show almost.
They might. I don't know if it would fall into the same niche as Iron Sysadmin. Maybe it would. So, at any rate, I guess we're going to close the show up because we're coming up on 2 hours anyway, and it's about that time. So, thank you, folks, for watching. Those of you who watch this live, anyone who's
Always
listening,
a pleasure to have you in our living room.
right. So, if you want to know what sort of weird things I had worn when Charles asked me what I was wearing, you're going to have to go back and look at the video if you're listening audio only. I don't recommend it. It wasn't that great. If you're listening afterward and you want to know when you can watch us live, you should probably head on over to YouTube, youtube.com/Iron Sysadmin Podcast, and subscribe and hit the little notification bell. It'll let you know when we go live, which is generally the second and fourth Thursday of every month. at around 7 p.m. Eastern. If you want to chat with us directly, you can do so via the Slack workspace. Go to ironsysadmin.com/Slack. If you have any problems with the link, please reach out to us on Twitter or Facebook. You can do so by searching for Iron Sysadmin on either of those two platforms. The Slack link, the reason I bring that up is because it does expire from time to time, and unless someone tells me it's expired, I don't always notice right away because, well, I'm not joining our Slack workspace all that often. So, if you want to listen to us in a way that is automatically downloaded to your phone, like you would expect a podcast to be, you can subscribe to us where you normally find podcasts. I know for a fact that we are on Apple Podcasts and Google Play Podcasts and Stitcher, and a lot of places syndicate those. So you can probably find us on lots of other places as well. If you can't find us, let us know, and we'll see if we can get the show listed.
When are we going to be on Live Journal?
Probably never.
Harsh.
I miss LiveJournal, like 2003 era LiveJournal.
Yeah. And if you'd like to support the show directly monetarily, you can do so via Patreon, patreon.com/Iron Sysadmin, and then we'll read your name off in the earlier parts of the show, the same way we did tonight. Don't worry, I almost always remember to drop off people's last names. So if you don't want to be, if you don't want your last name read on the air, don't worry, we won't be doing that. And I think that's it for tonight. So I'm just going to thump on my desk some more to make Mark wonder where the thunder's coming from.
Time to let him go. Let him go. Go and watch some more Netflix. No Disney Plus. Let him go. Let him go.
All right, folks. So thanks for watching, and we will catch you on the next show. Right? You guys want to say goodnight before I hit the button?
The next show. Good night, friends. Good night, fans. Good night, all. Good night, Moon.
Good night, Room.
You've just reminded me. Remember how Samuel L. Jackson read that "Go the F to Sleep" book?
Yeah.
Yes.
There's another one called "Stay the F at Home." You can imagine what it's about.
I can.
The same author reached out to Samuel L. Jackson and said, "Hey, I've got a new poem for you to read. Can you read this one on the air?" And he did it on like Jimmy Kimmel or something. So good stuff. Go look it up. Stay the F at home. All right. Good night, folks. Have a good one.
I'm gonna do both. I'm gonna look.
So you're gonna do both, Mark? You're gonna look up.
I'm gonna look it up, and I'm gonna stay the F at home.
Yeah, that is a good idea. All right, so anybody watching live, we're about to end the broadcast. Thanks for watching. Thanks for interacting. We saw up to like 4 or 5 people that were watching live at some point, and
So
awesome. I see Trooper and Mark.
Oh, hi, Mark.
Yeah, the other Mark, the Mark with a K, were interacting with us in the chat, and I think that's everyone I saw here. I'm just quick looking, but thank you guys for watching and interacting. It's always fun when listeners interact. So cool. All right, folks, have a good one, and we'll catch you next time.